Hello everyone, my name is Bruce Brown. I'm the chair of the music department, and your teachers asked me to share a little bit of information about the concert that you're going to be going to. I've worked with the Jackson Symphony for several years, and one thing I enjoy to do is before the concerts I talk about the music that's going to be on that program that night, and I enjoy looking up the background and sharing with people. So I'm going to see if I can share some things with you about this concert tonight, and I hope it helps you enjoy the music better. The program that we're going to hear tonight is three compositions, a work by a man named James Niblock called Three American Dances, and I got a little slide that'll be coming up here now that will show you the pieces on the program. The second piece on the program is a cello concerto by a French composer named Camille Saint-Saëns. And then finally we have a Symphony No. 3 in C major by Jan Sibelius, a Finnish composer. So I'll talk about each of those in turn a little bit and hopefully show you some pictures, and that will help you know where this music came from a little bit better. James Niblock was born on November 1st, 1917 in Scappoose, Oregon. I love the name of that town. It's kind of a fascinating name of a town to me. But he was a longtime faculty member at Michigan State University. Was the chair of the department there for many years, and became a professor emeritus, a very influential composer there. He was an MSU faculty member from 1948 to 1985, and professor of composition and violin. He played in the Beaumont String Quartet, and here I'm just going to show you a picture now of the quartet. This is Niblock, second from the left. And the first picture I showed you was when he was quite a bit older man, and now you see this is a quite a bit younger picture. His obituary from Michigan State University talks about how his influence will be felt for many years to come. He wrote more than 150 compositions, and more than 100 of them are published, so a very influential composer. Since the year 2000, he's written 3 operas, 3 double concertos for violin, clarinet, and orchestra, and several other short pieces and other things. In 2006, Michigan State honored him with the first Distinguished Emeritus Faculty Award for his work in fine arts education. On October 30th, 2017, Michigan State University had a special concert for his 100th birthday. He lived to be a little over 100 before he died. Niblock was a founding member of Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp. Some of you may have even had a chance to go to Blue Lake. And here's a nice picture of Blue Lake, the beautiful pavilion there, a beautiful forested setting where people go to study music in the summer. And he was the vice president of the board there, and in fact the longest serving member of the board. His friends, he had many friends in music, and one of them, a man named Walter Verder, said he did things right in his life up to his peaceful death. In every way, Jim Niblock left quite an amazing legacy. He was the Renaissance man of our music school. And another faculty member said his pieces were always audience friendly. He wrote wonderful, beautiful melodies which inspired you to try to do them justice. And talking about how late in his life he was piloting a plane, had a boat that he used on the lake, and so he had adventures also. His Three American Dances was written for the Dallas Symphony, and was conducted by Clyde Roller, who was the music director of the Lansing Symphony from 67 to 78. And Niblock says this about the music: in reality, the title refers to a style or character of expression, since the movements are not dance movements at all, but merely express the character or mood of certain traditional American dances. So that's the first work. The second piece on the concert by the Lansing Symphony would be the Cello Concerto No. 1 in A minor, Opus 33 by Camille Saint-Saëns. Now, that may sound very formal, but this opus number business is just a way that they would number their works in order. So this was basically the 33rd piece that Saint-Saëns wrote. Saint-Saëns was born in Paris, and I have a nice painting here that I think you're looking at right now. He was born in Paris October 9th, 1835, and lived until 1921. He was a tremendous child prodigy, they call it, a person who had great ability from a very early age. He wrote his first music, a short piano piece, shortly after his 3rd birthday. I think that's pretty young, no matter how you look at it. He gave his first recital at the age of 10, He offered to play any one of Beethoven's 32 piano sonatas as an encore. And if you've ever heard those works, they're very difficult and complex. And word of this incredible concert spread all the way across Europe, even as far as the United States. He was mentioned in an article in the Boston newspaper, age 16, when he wrote his first symphony. He had tremendous fame during his lifetime. He lived to be 86, another long-lived composer, toured as a piano player, and Franz Liszt, a great Romantic era composer, called him the greatest organist in the world. He wrote about 300 compositions. Here's a picture of him as a little bit older man. He wrote music in virtually every genre of his time, and in fact, he was the very first well-known composer that we know of that wrote music to be used in films, which is, I think, quite a noteworthy thing. It was in 1908, the assassination of the Duke of Guise. L'assassinat de Duc de Guise in my terrible French. That was really bad. If you know French, I apologize. About an 18-minute film, which is very long for that time. He wrote 13 operas and a great deal of other music. He wasn't just interested in music, by the way, but he also wrote poetry, articles on archaeology and botany. He studied geology, archaeology, botany, lepidoptery. I had to look that one up. That means the study of butterflies. But he was very interested in that. He was also an expert in mathematics, just had one of those minds where he could do almost anything. He wrote scholarly articles on acoustics, occult sciences, the decoration of Roman theaters, ancient instruments, all kinds of things. Just kind of a fascinating career. He was a member of the Astronomical Society of France and even had a telescope specially built to his own specifications. So not just a musician. He only had one teaching post during his lifetime, and that was at the École Niedermeyer School, Niedermeyer School. Some of his other contemporaries were kind of upset with some of the things that he did, Liszt and Gounod and others, but he didn't really worry about that too much. He said, "I take very little notice of either praise or censure, not because I have an exalted idea of my own merits, which would be foolish, but because in doing my work and fulfilling the function of my nature, as an apple tree grows apples, I have no need to trouble myself with other people's views." So he was kind of serene about what other people said about him. One more kind of personal note that you may find kind of interesting about Saint-Saëns. When he was age 40, he had a whirlwind romance with a 19-year-old young lady, Marie-Laure Truffaut. Saint-Saëns was deeply attached to his mother, but his mother objected to this romance in every way, but he married against his mother's wishes, and things did not go well. They had 2 sons, and they both died tragically. One of them fell from a 4th-floor window, and less than 6 weeks later, the second boy died of an infection. They thought he would get better, but he just sort of mysteriously died. And so the couple... that really destroyed their relationship also. So that's a very kind of a sad note in terms of his life. This concerto that you're going to hear tonight was in 1872. Saint-Saëns' a great aunt that he loved named Charlotte died. He was 37 years old. She had been his first music teacher and like a second mother to him, and he was really shocked by her death. And he turned to composing and wrote 2 cello pieces. And the cello, I think, is a very rich, emotional kind of an instrument to hear. He wrote this music for the Belgian cellist and viola da gamba player Auguste Tolbeck. Here's a picture of Tolbeck. The viola da gamba is an instrument that was really written during the Renaissance and earlier, built, I should say, during the Renaissance time. It was a string instrument, a little bit like the cello, but it had frets on it. And this man Tolbeck was a very famous instrument maker of his time. And he was a part of the Society of the Concerts of the Conservatory, and that's where the piece was first played. And it was first performed January 19th, 1873, so just about a decade after the American Civil War. Tolbeck was the soloist. And this showed that Saint-Saëns was getting more accepted than he had been earlier by the French establishment. One writer said, "Here for once is a violoncello concerto." That's the full name for the cello, by the way. Here for Once is a concerto in which the solo instrument displays every register without the slightest difficulty in penetrating the orchestra. And many other composers later, like including Shostakovich, Rachmaninoff, consider this the greatest of all cello concertos. It's kind of a unique piece. The concerto usually has three movements: fast, slow, fast. And this has it's one continuous movement, but there's three sections within it. And the three sections vary somewhat, but you'll hear themes, if you're noticing them, that are woven throughout the piece. And that's called a cyclic form, where the one theme is not just in one movement of the piece, but throughout the piece you could hear the same melody. And so the three sections have a little bit different tempos. And by the way, when you see in the program to an orchestra concert, if it lists the tempo, and it's in Italian, but I think your teachers have probably talked to you about these words a little bit. The first main section is called Allegro non troppo, which simply means fast, but not too fast. So don't get carried away. And another interesting and unusual feature of this is that very often in a concerto there's a long introduction, then the soloist plays. Here there's just a quick chord, and then the cello jumps right in. The second movement is Allegretto con moto. It's moderately fast. Con moto means with motion, so you feel the movement of the music in this movement. It's kind of short, but very much a minuet. It's music you could dance to. And the strings are muted, and there's a cello cadenza here, which is a solo part for the cello to play along a fairly long period of time when just the soloist is playing and the orchestra is resting. And then the last main section is called Tempo Primo, which just means like the beginning or the first tempo. And so this is a restatement of the opening material. And so very often in this piece, the soloist is the main point of interest, and the orchestra is offering what one writer called a shimmering backdrop. So I think you'll find this very cool to hear. Very, very difficult to play, but cellists love this piece. They love working on overcoming these difficulties, and it's a piece that they love playing, even though it's very, very difficult to learn. Here's a picture of our soloist for tonight. Hong is his name. He's the principal cellist with the Lansing Symphony Orchestra, and also played with an international chamber soloist orchestra, well-known group. But he was born in Asia. He first played in orchestras in Asia. He was born in Singapore, I believe. I'm not finding that in my notes right now, sorry to say. But at age 13, he started playing the cello. In 2003, he got a full scholarship to study at Yong Siu To University in Singapore. In 2010, he completed his performance diploma at the Peabody Institute, which is in Baltimore. So he came to study in the United States. And since 2012, he's been studying for a doctorate at the University of Michigan. So an international figure and a very fine player, I understand. He received the Stanley and Selma Hollander Endowed Scholarship, which is another really feather in his cap. He played for many famous cellists. You may have heard the word Yo-Yo Ma, probably the most famous living cellist. And Yo-Yo Ma heard him play and said, Hong's playing could bring the audience into a brand new world. That's quite a compliment. So the last piece on the concert is the Symphony No. 3 in C major, Opus 52. So now you're well acquainted. You know Opus 52 means it's his 52nd piece that he wrote. Sibelius is a Finnish composer. He was born in December 8th, 1865, so right at the end of the American Civil War. Lived until 1957. And that's something that's always kind of amazed me. We think of someone living at a certain time, maybe Civil War time, but here's a man whose career spanned from the American Civil War until well after the end of World War II, even the Korean War, almost 92 years. So all the composers on tonight's program had a long life. Sibelius' music is deeply rooted in the folklore and culture of Finland, the land where he grew up, and also his own very unique and remarkable artistic vision. One critic, Neville Cardus, said, Sibelius justified the austerity of his old age by saying that while other composers were engaged in manufacturing cocktails, in other words, giving people a sweet confection to drink. But austerity means that his music is, later in his life, not this symphony, but later on, his music became rather stern in some ways, okay? And he said that Sibelius, instead of these cocktails, offered the public pure cold water. In one poll, he was named among the top 10 Finnish characters of all time. In the 1940s, his music was tremendously popular in America, and one poll given by CBS, the radio audience identified Sibelius as their favorite composer. But by his death, his music was kind of fading, and it's still heard very often if you go to a concert like tonight, and I enjoy hearing it, but it doesn't have nearly the popularity that it did about that time in the 1940s. As a boy, he wanted to be a violinist, and he studied the violin and came quite good. You heard the concerto earlier. Concerto was a work with soloist, and he only wrote one concerto himself, which was a violin concerto that really shows his great knowledge of the instrument. His father was a doctor and died in a cholera epidemic, actually, in 1867. Sibelius was 2 or 3 years old at this time, and then raised from that point by his mother and grandmother. Again, very talented as a young boy. By age 10, he wrote his first composition, a piece for violin and cello. They would be plucking, which is called pizzicato. You may hear some of that playing tonight. And it was called Vattendroppar, water drops. Age 20, he enrolled at the University of Helsinki, Finland, but he was studying to be a lawyer, not to be a musician. But he only lasted at that about a year, and some other composers studied other things and then realized how much they loved music and turned to that. So he began studying composition, and his genius was soon recognized. In 1889, he got a government stipend and scholarship to study abroad, and he wanted to go to St. Petersburg to study with the great Russian composer Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, but he went to Berlin and then Vienna. And he just really found out at that time how much he loved the sound of the orchestra and writing for it. He wrote a piece, Finlandia, in 1899, which is really one of the most popular pieces to Finnish people. They love this music. It's like a second national anthem to them. And he became kind of internationally famous from that. You may know this tune because the hymn "Be Still My Soul." Da 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 da. That's the tune from Finlandia. Critics didn't love his music at first, actually. And one critic, I love these quotes where critics sometimes take somebody on. He called Sibelius a spare, knotted barbarian from the world of the sagas, one who might have been a comrade to pelted warriors who fought with clubs and hammers, who might have beaten out rude music by black smoking hearthsides. Well, that's quite a insult, isn't it? But Sibelius had a pretty good answer. He said, "Pay no attention to what critics say. No statue has ever been put up to a critic." Performing musicians and the public recognized his genius much more quickly. Kind of an interesting fact about Sibelius is that he stopped writing music for the last 30 years of his life. And one or two other composers have done that. He had his 90th birthday in 1955, and by then he was a world celebrity. He received 1,200 telegrams. The monarchs of Scandinavian countries all sent him gifts. Winston Churchill sent him a box of cigars, and even the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra, Eugene Ormandy, met with him to gave special performances. So there were two influences on Sibelius. As I said, these wonderful folk legends of Finland, and then also his love of nature. And here's a picture of his house, and you can see it's just covered with snow, very wintry. It was sat up on top of a high hill, I understand. But Sibelius said this: "I love the mysterious sounds of the fields and forests, water and mountains. It pleases me greatly to be called a poet of nature, for nature has truly been the book of books for me." And he once said of his Sixth Symphony, "It always reminds me of the scent of the first snow." Well, this time of year we're ready for the scent of the last snow, right? We're ready for spring. But I think that's a very interesting, kind of a poignant image to hear from Sibelius. So this symphony is in 3 movements, composed in 1907 when he was about 42 years old, and it's been described as a good-natured, triumphal, and deceptively simple-sounding piece. Deceptively, because none of his music is overly simple, but it just sounds fresh and almost improvised in some ways. Sibelius conducted the first performance by the Helsinki Philharmonic Society, September 25th, 1907, so just after the turn into the 20th century. It's a kind of a turning point in his life. His first and second symphonies are very grand and romantic, even patriotic, and his later symphonies, as we said, were more austere, kind of plain in a certain way, complex, but not highly ornamented. They were very serious and somber in a way. But the third is unique among all his works. It's almost classical. Now we say classical, it refers back to the age of Mozart and Haydn, perhaps, where things were very much about design and form and balance. And he was working to get the largest amount of musical material and the fewest possible melodic figures and harmonies. Musical economy, we can call it. Almost reminiscent of some of Beethoven's wonderful symphonies. Just about a 30-minute piece. So there's a very quick look at the works for tonight's concert, and I think you will enjoy it very much. You'll get a really good look at this cellist as he's performing, and watch how athletic it is, how much it's, playing a solo concerto is very much like an athlete having to perform and, and show endurance and show strength and focus and concentration. And all the musicians really will have that quality, I think you'll find. But 3 very unique works, somewhat different from each other, but it make a very interesting set, and I hope you enjoy the concert. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy.